Welcome everyone to the Flux Dev Meeting, November 28th, 2024. Happy Thanksgiving for those that celebrate. Let's get started. Sunny, do you want to speak about the first agenda?
So somebody created a pull request for Flux CLI to respect the namespace that is in the kubeconfig. So kubeconfig has for each of the contexts in kubeconfig, there is a namespace field, which is by default not set. Seems like some people set it. And when you set it, the tool that uses a kubeconfig is expected to respect that namespace, but Flux CLI doesn't do that. So this pull request is about, so there was a discussion before this pull request. Do you have the link, Kingdom? It's in the pull request itself, where I think last year or 2 years ago, somebody opened an issue and there was a discussion about what do we do about it. Kingdom, you suggested that maybe we should have this would be a breaking change. Like we were not respecting kubeconfig context namespace before, and if we start respecting it, it would be a surprise for some user, may break things. So you're suggesting we introduce a environment variable that tells the Flux CLI to respect the kubeconfig context namespace. But then later, Max, another maintainer, he came and he expressed that it would be better to just respect it, and there can be a priority. And he did some initial implementation, which didn't go anywhere. And I think last month, a contributor created a pull request adding the first idea of an environment variable to tell the Flux CLI to follow the kubeconfig context namespace. So we don't have a agreed upon solution. How do we address this problem? I went through the details, and to me, it looks like respecting seems to be better. I listed a few documentation links of Kubernetes, upstream Kubernetes, where it seems like kubeconfig context namespace is not set by default. It's the way it's documented, it seems like people explicitly set it when they have a need to change the default namespace. So to me, it looks like existence of this field is an explicit request to use this namespace instead of anything else. And adding another way to tell to respect this seems redundant. The kubeconfig says that we should respect this. And then we have another layer of declaring the same thing using an environment variable. So I was like, maybe we don't need to do this. If we see the namespace is there in the kubeconfig, we should respect it, because most of the cases it won't be there. So I said, maybe I don't know what to do. We may have to gather some more opinions about this from users, what they think, how impactful it would be. Would it really break a lot, or it would be this invisible change?
I think it is worth a poll at least, or something, to try to gauge how many people fall into which buckets. I think the justification for my position that the current behavior is correct is that the multi-tenancy features of Flux are opt-in. So if you want a Flux environment to be deployed such that tenants are isolated and people have access to only one namespace, then you have to set a flag already for that. So that suggests to me, at least, it may not be the case, but it suggests to me that the most common use of Flux is the single tenant cluster admin, which is not to say that applications are not in tenants. But that the Flux resources themselves are centralized in the Flux system namespace, and that they're managed by an admin or a platform team. But I can definitely see both cases. I can almost see 4 separate cases where you would have multiple use cases inside of the same cluster, where you probably have a platform team and app admins who are, and it's a CLI flag, so that I would propose so that it would be um, possible for those people to coexist without any real conflict. Um, but I will admit, when I first noticed that the Flux CLI didn't follow the context, I was thrown, and it didn't make sense to me at first. So if the consensus otherwise is that we should just follow the context, and I don't know if we would declare a breaking change or um, provide a way to, I mean, we already have a way to restore the original behavior. You just set Flux system namespace equal to Flux system, and then it wouldn't follow the context, or maybe it should. I don't know. It would
There is a way.
clearly, they would be in conflict if you said Flux system namespace and you set follow namespace. That wouldn't be a sensible configuration. So
If we go ahead with respecting the namespace by default, then if it breaks, we can just say use that environment variable to set, which we already have, to make it explicit.
yeah, definitely see the perspective of not having too many knobs being an advantage. If there's just one knob to control, then there isn't an invalid configuration possible. And yeah.
One more thing that I just thought about. So usually, if you have something in configuration file that takes precedence over an environment variable, right? Or a flag takes the highest precedence than whatever is the configuration. I don't know. Is that true? Should the environment variable be least important?
I would think that the environment variable would override the configuration in the file. But I'm not really 100% certain on that either. There definitely should be a precedence order that's documented. I know that we've had, like, I'm thinking of the Helm release values file situation where there is somewhere deep in the docs where you can find out what order the precedence is. And some people are always surprised when they find out that it's the order that it is. Um,
If
Not
the
easy to find either.
if the kubeconfig is not explicitly specified, the CLI goes and looks for it, but the environment variable, even that can be not explicit. You can set it before and not in the same command. I don't know. I think we need to define what should take precedence for its levels.
Well, so if it's a breaking change, should we have an RFC?
I don't think we need RFC.
I mean, it's not a
Prevention.
major change, but it could be considered a breaking change. I wouldn't want to increment the Flux major version for this. I would think it would be
No, no.
considered a bug fix if anything. But just to have a documented reasoning in a prominent place, I mean, that's the only reason I would think it might be worth an RFC, so that when people come with the question, why did it change, we can just point them at the RFC and say, here, this is the reasoning. And there's, a clear section where it documents what you can do if you don't like this change, all in one place.
I don't know. I don't say RFC is needed for this. it just like said it in the change log that this is a breaking change. And it's not like many, by default, this is not the thing people will encounter. This would be some specific cases. I don't think it's needed. Any other opinion, Matthias? Any thoughts about this? Have you seen any other tool doing something else? Or did we have you used this in the quick config namespace, context namespace?
Um, in my previous job, we had Flux objects in other namespaces that were not Flux system, but nobody ever used the CLI there. So
And this fellow here is ready to close his PR. He's clearly tired of thinking about this issue, and they're just going to patch it locally, which I think is the negative outcome. So just like people not using the CLI, I don't know if that's already predetermined thing that, some people just aren't going to use the CLI, or if it's something you can attribute to some failure, like the CLI isn't friendly enough.
what they want is the breaking one, or
I
are
think
already
they
proposing a
wanted
way
to
to
honor the kubectx or kubectl context.
I think they don't
without
care.
like, so they don't care about the change being in a breaking one, right?
They don't care how, they just need a way to do it.
So there's at least three different axes to consider here. One is the Flux system namespace may not be Flux system. Like if you're using Cozy Stack, then you may want to set the Flux system namespace to some other namespace, like Cozy Flux CD. The second is you may have Flux resources outside of the Flux system namespace, and you may be charged with monitoring only those. So, or you may not have access to the Flux system namespace if you are in a multi-tenant cluster. So if you're in that situation, Flux system namespace almost doesn't make sense as a name, because you kind of have to abuse it in order to get the behavior that you want, where it should just show you your resources when you say flux get. And then a third thing is the person who has multiple namespaces to care over, where following the kubectx may be beneficial. But the fourth thing is the person who hasn't really considered any of these configurations, really using Flux for the first time, who I know I started using Flux, deploying my Flux resources across a bunch of namespace, and I later came to regret that, and I wound up moving everything back into the Flux system namespace because, well, I wonder if it's because of the behavior, the current behavior, that I did that, because it just makes more sense to keep things in one place if the CLI doesn't follow the namespace. It's hard for me to reason about this. I'm definitely biased.
Well, I experienced something similar, Kingdon, and the only rationale that I had at the time was I just didn't get it working unless all the Flux resources were in the same namespace.
That's the other thing, is we have the image update automation where you really need all the resources in the same namespace, and it's the last thing people think to check when they design their system without. So like this behavior is the one thing that other than image update automation not working, that would encourage you to try keeping things in one single namespace. And I think that's the behavior. Like if you follow the docs, that's what we suggest you do. I think maybe. Anyway,
Well, I think like if there's a way that we can um change the CLI such that um it does what this guy wants, but is not what like but is not breaking, that would be okay. Like because so if I understand correctly, what they want is to out of the box, the CLI has to honor the namespace in the kubeconfig, right? Out of the box, without doing anything. Is what they want, right?
I'm not sure that they had a strong opinion about that. I think
If it can be like an environment
They,
variable,
I said they don't care how, they just want a way to be doing. And it's not them, it's from the other discussion. I think they know now. The person who started this conversation, even they didn't care how, they just wanted a way to change it
yeah.
or
So
respect it.
I would be okay with the breaking change. See, so what I think is that most Flux users probably will want it to follow the kube context, and that's just based on my own experience. But we got some positive reactions to this. People like the idea of having a variable that you could set. But I'm ambivalent. I think the follow behavior is probably the correct one and the one that most people will want. I think if we keep the current default, then this sysadmin who has people who are app admins will have to tell everyone to use this variable in order to get the reasonable behavior. I would be happy to set this variable myself. I have a ZSHRC full of variables, and I look at the docs, so I would be happy to set this to false in order to get the current behavior. And I think people would be okay with that in general, as long as there's a path so that people who built on the CLI and that depend on the current behavior aren't out of luck. But um, on the other hand, if you set Flux system namespace, you kind of get that behavior. It's just poorly labeled.
I don't have a strong opinion. I would prefer not to make a breaking change here, but
I think if we introduce this variable and allow people to set it, then we get everything. If allow people to set it to true to follow, we get everything we want without a breaking change. I don't think anyone would be unhappy about that, except
yeah.
people who didn't find this option at all.
It feels like when we can fix the flux behavior, this will continue to have the bad, unexpected behavior. Any Kubernetes user using Kubernetes tool will expect it to respect that. There will be an exception, we will not fix that bug.
Well, we could fix it when Flux 3 comes along, and then it would be the right time for a breaking change. I'm not saying that's going to be soon, but I agree that a breaking change, no matter how small, is risky to put in. We could also adopt breakver that says you can make breaking changes inside of a major release. I don't know the details, but um,
You mean a minor?
inside of a minor release, as long as I think it's as long as there's enough advance notice, and like we couldn't do it in the next minor release, but we could notify everyone in the next minor release that the following minor release will I'm not exactly sure how this, I have to read it, but I read about at least one person who adopted this for their Ruby project, and they were really happy with the idea of it. I don't think that a lot of Flux users would be thrilled to hear that we're not doing semver anymore. And I feel like a breaking change anywhere other than a major release would be like the same thing. Is if even if we didn't come right out and say we're adopting breakfor, it would be kind of risky. I almost feel bad that I have such a strong opinion about this because I don't know who did this or whether it was on purpose. So I kind of feel like I'm here defending Chesterton's fence.
Stefan showed a thumbs up in my comment. It seems like he's with what I'm saying. I don't know which part of what I'm saying. Maybe gather more opinion or respecting the config. And my guess is he wrote the code.
I mean, if we make this breaking change of the default following the kubeconfig, could this really destroy somebody's cluster? Like, could this really like?
Or it can create double things. You were previously creating resources with kube system, Flux system. With this, maybe your kubeconfig has some other namespace. You will
And that
duplicate
can
the
be annoying,
resources.
right? That can be really annoying, right?
It won't be destructive. It will be just duplicating resources.
I mean, not destructive in the sense of deleting objects, but it could be a destruction. Like, I don't know, like,
In the sense that your CI breaks when you upgrade to the next version of the Flux CLI, right? Because you had not read the minor. I mean, you should read the changelog before you upgrade your CI. I don't really think there's any argument there, but semver kind of guarantees that there aren't breaking changes without a major release. So you are supposed to be assured at least. And we did somewhere say explicitly that the CLI was part of the GA. Like there's semver is a contract and you get to say what is and isn't included. It's on the developer team who does the releases to be explicit about what is covered and isn't covered by the semver one. When it's just a promise that we won't make breaking changes without incrementing this number again. So
what if we like ship this in some phases? Like first we ship just a warning that shows everywhere where you're not using the -n flag, right? Where you explicitly specify the namespace. If you're not explicitly specifying the namespace, then you see a warning, and then 6 months later we do the breaking change.
You mean if the kubeconfig contains namespace, then we issue the warning.
What?
If the kubeconfig contains a namespace, then we issue the warning saying this will change. You're saying -n, but we're not talking about flags.
Right, but I'm just saying this because I'm assuming that the user that uses a Flux CLI command that does not specify a namespace is relying on the default behavior of Flux system as of now, right? But if they do specify a namespace, they're not relying on that, so it's not relevant for those commands, right? So, and since the changes for those who are not specifying the namespace with -n, then in those cases we print a warning saying, hey.
Well, I'm saying not even that. Only if the kubeconfig has a namespace, those people will be affected. So we issue warning only for those.
Right. Okay, so it can be. We also, okay, so we don't need to show this warning for those who are specifying in a namespace in the command. And furthermore, we also don't need to show that warning for those who don't have a
Only
namespace in the kubeconfig, right? So
only when
so
people
only
have
yeah,
this.
so only if there's no namespace specified but there's a namespace in the kubeconfig, right? So if these two conditions hold, then we print a warning. And then
But
6 months
the-
later, we change
But
it.
in case of CI, this will not prevent anything. It's just we expect people
Yeah.
to see.
Yeah. Well, what if we do this warning? We also put this warning in more places, like in a change log from like, so in the change log of where we added the warning, we already put a big banner somewhere saying that we're planning to change this default behavior. So it's like it's already in a change log before the change actually happens. We can repeat this for another
We
quarter,
can. But
and
it
then
feels
in the
like this.
third quarter we change.
But it feels like it's not so significant to do so much of those things. Most likely people will not use it. Only power users or power users would be setting this field. They will know that there such thing exists, and they would be really annoyed by Flux not following it.
I agree. This feels like overkill, and it seems like it would be annoying, but at the same time, it does accomplish the goal that, you know, even people who didn't read the changelog find out about the new option and aren't surprised by the new behavior unless they're just not reading the output of the CLI. Like, you can set an environment variable to make this go away, and it will go away in the next release. So it's not that bad, but it is a lot of ceremony for something that could be considered a bug fix.
Yeah. Well, fine with
Maybe.
any solution.
Maybe we'll have some decision next week. And Kingdon, you can you're posting this, maybe tell in the pull request that you have posted this here. Did you mention that we have discussed this?
Yeah,
did
I'm
not-
mentioning that it's in the dev meeting here. Somewhere in here I mentioned we are talking at the dev meeting.
Anything else about this topic? Any other thoughts?
No, I
We'll go
think we
for
beat it to death.
The next topic is I want to bring to attention this GitHub app authentication pull request. It's ready, has been ready for many weeks. I reviewed it. I have to review one more time. I think it's ready, but needs more review from multiple people. I may be missing something. And Deepti, the contributor, would be on vacation in December, so if we review it early, it would be better. I'm trying to recall, is there anything to discuss about that? Let me have a look. Is there anything specific? I think it's okay. Next topic, it's about the cache, the new improvements in to the cache implementation. King, can you open the link, the third topic? It's a pull request, and then you should go to the discussion. There's only one discussion there. Open down this discussion. So the implementation is based on what was proposed maybe a few months ago. We wanted to simplify the cache, and one of the part of simplification was to wait. Okay, so for the get method in the cache, we were returning the value and a Boolean existing, which its name was exists, and the error. And when there is a cache hit, item exists in the cache, the Boolean will be true, and then there will be a value, and error will be nil. But when there's a cache miss, Boolean will be false. Error will not be any error, it will be nil. I do not know why it was done this way. I looked at a few other cache implementations elsewhere in Go. I have listed a few of those implementations in my comments. So it seems like some projects prefer returning no error when there's a cache miss, and they use a Boolean to indicate that the item was not found. I found two implementation, but some are like very old code. And I found one other project which returns an error saying not found. To me, it felt like, and to Dipti as well, returning not found seems to be more consistent with the behavior, because we have some other methods, not in the cache interface itself, but some other helper functions. It's like get expiration and set expiration, and in those functions, when the item does not exist, we return not found. But for just getting the cached item, we do not return a error not found error when the item is not found. The initial solution was to return a pointer instead of a value. And if the pointer is nil, we know that item is not found. If it's not nil, item is found. But recently, when Dipti tried this new API, for some reason, she found it not intuitive and suggested that we should return an error. And I don't have any reasons to not return an error. I'm also convinced that returning an error is the better way to do this. So can you scroll? There are some API examples. I wanted to show the consequences of the new change. Yeah, this is quite fun. So the first code snippet, that's how we used to do before this change. So we were returning a pointer. So we would just check if the pointer is nil, it's a not found scenario. But with the new API, you have to check the error. If error is not found, then it's a cache miss, and then you obtain whatever you're trying to save. Or let's say you're dealing with credentials, you obtain a new credential and save it in the cache. So that with the new method, third snippet shows how you'll use it. So you do a cache get. Get will return the value or an error. And if error is not nil, then you do further checking what's the error value. If it's not found, then you record it as a cache miss and then obtain whatever you need to save in the cache. Otherwise, you return the error if it's with any other error. Else, it was a cache hit when you proceed. But previously, API was such that you receive a pointer and an error. If it's an error, you just return the error. And then you check if the pointer is nil or not nil. In a way, I felt it was better because there's less nested code and less if things, if conditions. But maybe the new one is more intuitive. So I made this change as a separate commit in case we find any good reason to stick to the previous signature. But the latest code does the error returning thing. So I just need some opinion. Can you think
I
of
have a
any
strong
reason?
opinion about this. Like, like for example, when you have a function call that is a call to an API and like an HTTP API, and then you return an error upon status code that is 4xx or 5xx. Usually you're gonna get a not found as an error, right? And there are situations where your code can handle not found fine. Like it's not really an error situation. You just have to do something when the resource does not exist, and the code would not actually fail because of that. So I think it's fine to have this version where we return a not found as an error. Right? You can argue
It's
this, right?
the way I'm even thinking about this is because in a way this is similar to the Kubernetes client. We do this all the time in Kubernetes client in the reconsiders. We do a
Right.
get. If we don't if we do a get of the object, it's not found. We just
Exactly,
end the
exactly,
reconciliation. But the difference
exactly.
in this case is the way we will be using it. When we don't find it, we'll get a new value and set it. We don't just return it immediately. There's more things to be done when it's a cache miss. We find the new value and set it. So use cases are a bit different from a normal HTTP client or Kubernetes client. But I'm not for the old thing, old way. I think new way is more intuitive, it's okay. But I can see the benefit in the old way. In some way.
Also, like the old way, I think there's a problem with the old way, which is like returning a pointer, because sometimes you do want to return a pointer. Like what you want, what's in the cache is a pointer, and then you would have a
No,
pointer to pointer like that.
in
That's
this case, you cannot. It has to be a type. It's a generic type cache.
right,
I
right.
don't know.
But
Can you set a pointer as a generic?
well, I don't know Go, but in C++ you could if you want. I don't see a problem if it was possible in Go. So yeah, I don't know. Like if I think like a pointer, like you don't always want to store, like sometimes what you store in the cache is a pointer.
But when you
So
obtain it, you are not obtaining that same pointer. That will let you override the cache. You would do a copy of that value and return a pointer. That's what I was doing before. Do you see difference? Should I say it again?
yes.
So if you're assuming that you're returning the items pointer from the cache, that will expose it to overwriting the cached value with the value you have obtained from the cache. So you do a copy of the value and then return a pointer to the copy of that value. You're preventing write of the cache without using the set function. Does that make sense?
Yes.
To update the cache, you need to use the set function, but you're changing that through a pointer, which is not allowed.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine either way. I I think the new way is okay. It's consistent with how we do it in other places, so it's fine.
Okay. This has like 2 approvals. If you want to review, you can review it. I think we can merge it.
Cool. AKG 8.7. I'll do
And we
that now.
can start using it. Oh no, we cannot start using it. Sorry. The next part of my discussion is, since this is ready now, I would start writing an issue describing how we'll use cache in Flux, all the different things we need to consider, things like how we tune the cache, all the configurations of the cache for multiple instances of cache. So source controller will have a Helm index cache, a Git repository credential cache, OCA credential cache. So there will be so many caches in various places. How will we configure them? This issue will discuss that. As I don't have the solution, but it will discuss that. So we have proper visibility of how things will be done. And then the key, cache key, what keys would be used for each of these different caches. For Git, we may have to consider different things for what should be a key, which would be different from the OCI cache, OCI image cache. So I think it would be better if we discuss it first and then do the implementation, so we are clear. And I think one more thing was you created some issue, yes, about what was it called? Multi-tenant OIDC authentication. So if we have multi-tenant OIDC authentication implemented, what would be the cache of keys in that case? So I don't have a solution or any proposal for any of these, but that issue will try to bring all these things to attention, and then we can discuss and have a finalized agreement on how we'll use cache. And there is a chance that the way we use it in one component will affect how we use it in another. We need it to be consistent across Flux. That's another goal, to have consistency, cache API consistency, API behavior. Any question? I'll start writing an issue. It will not be an RFC, it will just be an issue, like a lot of issues I've written, describing problems. Anything else? Anything I missed? I'll think about it. Anything else to consider in cache? If nothing else, I think that's over. All the topics are over.
Going once. Going twice.
Is there any new issue or anything to discuss? Thank you.
Okay, then I think that's it. Thanks everyone for joining.
Happy Thanksgiving to you again, Kingdon. Have a good evening, everyone. Bye.